In today's activity, we're going to be making cheese. This is a Paneer cheese, which is a fresh cheese. It's not aged. Basically, all that we're doing is heating up the milk, adding some vinegar, which is acidic, which is going to break up the milk into its component parts. The protein is going to separate the casein from the whey. The whey is the liquid protein portion, and the casein is the portion that we're going to see is going to form curds. It's going to be like clumps. What we're looking at today is the difference between whole milk and 2% milk. We're going to start now with the whole milk. Again, it's 32 ounces into a hot pan, because these electric pans take a little bit of time. Electric ranges take some time to get going. So I have my whole milk in. I'll put the 2% in. So again, 32 ounces of each. And I'll keep giving them a stir. Again, we don't want them to boil. We just want them to heat up. Again, we'll take the temperature. Another alcohol wipe. When I'm at work taking temperatures, depending on the place that I'm at, sometimes I could go through 30 to 75 of these on one inspection. So I go through a lot of the cases of alcohol wipes. All right, here's the temperature of the whole milk. About 165 degrees, and we'll go into the 2%. We're at about 155, so I'm going to turn the heat up. While I'm waiting for the milk to come to temperature, I have my strainer colander set up underneath the cheesecloth. So what I'm going to do is make a pocket in the colander with the cheesecloth and pour the liquid through, and that's going to help collect the. What's going to happen is the liquid whey is going to drain out, and I will be left with the curds, the casein protein. So I'm going to take that, then salt it, wrap it, and then put it into one of the cheese presses, which is over here, just slightly out of frame. And then it presses for about an hour. Typically, when you're making cheese, it depends on the type of cheese product you are trying to make, decides if you're adding a bacteria or a mold, and if you're adding it internally or externally. It's all in the aging process. So typically with a cheddar cheese is formed by collecting the curd, those solid pieces, and pressing them into blocks. That's known as the cheddaring process. From there, the blocks, the curd is salted, pressed, and bacteria is introduced, which helps break down the sugar, and that is how you get the flavor development of a cheddar cheese. If you have a yellow cheddar cheese, the color can come from annatto extract, which is just a natural yellow food coloring. And that's how you end up with your cheddar cheese. The aging process is what can intensify the flavor. So a mild cheddar cheese is not aged for as long as a sharp cheddar cheese. So the flavor is not as strong. A mild cheddar cheese also has lactose left in the product because the bacteria haven't had enough time to completely break down all of the lactose. So if you look at the nutrition facts and the nutrition facts panel for mild cheddar cheese, you might see some sugar included, and that sugar, unless it's sugar added, which some cheeses have that, but the sugar that's naturally going to be there is from lactose. Now, a sharp cheddar cheese is aged long enough so that the bacteria breaks down the sugar, metabolizes the sugar, creates metabolic byproducts, and that is what gives us the sharper flavor, that enhanced, bolder flavor of cheddar cheese. There, if you look at the label, there will be no sugar because the lactose has already been metabolized. So theoretically, that means if you are lactose intolerant, where you lack the lactase ASE enzyme, which is required to break down lactose OSE, the sugar. So if you don't have this lactase ASE enzyme, then you can't break down lactose. But sharp cheddar cheese has no lactose left in it. So theoretically, you will be able to consume that cheese without any of the gastrointestinal disturbances. I think it's time for another stir and temperature check. Whole milk's 190. 2% milk is 192. So I'd say we're ready. 1 ounce of vinegar is going to go into the 32 ounces of whole milk, and 1 ounce of vinegar is going to go into the 32 ounces of 2% milk. And what we should see happen is that it's going to start to separate right away. I'm actually going to move these for a second. All right. So here we go. Whole milk, 2% milk. And I have 1 ounce of vinegar to add to each. So I have my vinegar added, and I'm just going to stir both of them up. You can see, I'm trying not to spill it, but you can see that it's already starting to get clumpy. So it's really watery, and then there's clumps. That watery looking fluid is whey, and the clumps are casein. So I'm going to give that a couple more stirs. Again, that's the whole milk. Now we're going into the 2% milk that has the vinegar added. So as soon as I put the spoon in, I can see it starting to separate out. So here, if you look at this, is the 2%. The clumps look like they might be a little bit smaller. But that's what we're looking at. So those clumps, that's the curd, that's the casein, and the liquid is the whey. So I'm just going to stir this a few more times. Funny story, every time I see this, every time I do this lab activity, I'm reminded of the one class that I took here on campus where we were in lab 4011, and we had to make a corn chowder. So up until the point that you add the cream, a chowder is really just a soup, right? It's not thick. I learned a hard lesson that day because maybe I didn't read the instructions well enough, or maybe I just wasn't paying attention. Maybe I just didn't really know any better. But I added the cream while the other ingredients, the liquid, the what was supposed to be chowder, was still hot, still very hot, like basically boiling. So as I added the cream in, it instantly separated out. So instead of a nice thick creamy corn chowder, what my group ended up with was a super runny, it looked like extra liquid was added with these little clumps that looked almost like egg whites. So the flavor wasn't bad. The flavor was what it was supposed to be, but it was not pretty to look at. And was not the best texture either, because again, it released all the whey, so it's all that extra water or liquid, and well, the whey is in water, but it's not just water alone, and the casein was separated out, so it was not that appetizing at all. That's a little story for you. So again, giving these another stir. What I'm going to do now is set these aside. I have a rack for them to cool, and I'm going to let them cool for about 10 minutes. So 10 minutes have passed. What we're going to do now is strain the curds and the whey, the casein and the whey, through the cheesecloth. So the first one we are going to do is the whole milk. So I'm just carefully, or as carefully as I possibly can, making a pocket out of the cheesecloth. I'm going to try to hold it so I don't get any whey on it from the other side. Normally this is a two-person process, but we'll give it a shot. So again, you can really see that the curds have formed and the whey is really separated out. So here's the first, just pouring it through. I'll use a spoon to get all of it. So this is the whole milk, and if you see, it has some nice crumbly curds. So now, just put that there momentarily, put this off to the side. That's the whole milk. Take the cutting board. Actually, before we get rid of this bowl of whey, I'm going to just collect this. I'm going to do a little twist and squeeze. It's pretty warm. You want to make sure that when you're squeezing the cheesecloth, that the curds don't go up into the knot, that it goes down, that it all stays down as one solid mass in the cheesecloth itself. So I'm just trying to squeeze as much as I can right now. Okay, that's about it. So what I'm going to do here, and it looks like there's some specks that that's from the milk burning on the bottom of the pan a little bit. That's completely my fault. Hopefully you have more success with that. But I have here a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. I'm just going to sprinkle it on like that. And then with my gloved fingers, just try to incorporate the salt and the curd or the casein together. So what we're going to do now is try to get it in as much as one mass as possible. So I'm just squeezing this almost to form like a patty out of it. So this is the curd. So this liquid is the whey, which if you've ever had a protein shake that contains whey, what you're consuming is spray-dried liquid whey that is flavored, sometimes colored, and then put into your drink mixes. So I have this patty looking thing over here. I'm going to gather all the parts of the cheesecloth. This was salted. Again, I'm just going to tighten it, and as I'm squeezing, more whey is coming out. You can see that. You can see the whey coming out as I squeeze. So we're going to put this in the cheese press, and we're going to put it in the cheese press for about an hour. And what's going to happen is the weight of the press is going to force more of the whey out of the casein as we form a more solid mass of cheese. So what I'm going to do actually is just drop it into the press without doing it right now, because I want to do that on camera. But I'm going to do the whole milk and the 2% at the same time. So what I want to do now is repeat the process that you just saw for the whole milk for the 2%. So again, I have my colander in a bowl with my cheesecloth, and I just set the cheesecloth kind of off to the side. So, because if it was underneath, then I would get curd and whey underneath, and it would just make it harder to work with later. So you want to try to, that's a little trick, little tip just to make it a little easier. All right, I think I have it all gathered here. So again, over the bowl, what you see, that liquid is the whey, and we have the curds, the casein coming out. There we go, they look really good. Again, we have some trapped in here. Just going to use my spoon. You can see the casein in the bottom of the pan. I'm going to just scoop it all out. So it's crazy to think that you got these two things just from milk and a little bit of vinegar, as I spilled the whey all over the table. But that's okay, that's why we have paper towels. So, just going to strain this out through the cheesecloth. So, if we stopped here with this substance, it might look familiar to you. If you ever had cottage cheese, basically, that's what this is. You separate you add acid or an enzyme, you separate the casein from the whey, and you strain the casein out of the whey, and there you have cottage cheese. But we're going to turn this into a paneer cheese. So again, I'm going to kind of fold up the cheesecloth, make a bundle, make sure all the sides are gathered. Now you can see more of the whey coming out of the cloth as I squeeze. Remember, you want to try to twist to make sure that the curds don't go up into the knot into your hand, that you just squeeze everything down. So try your best to squeeze out the squeeze out the whey. And for those of you that might be a little confused, I'm talking about whey, W-H-E-Y. Not whey, like, let's get this out of the way, W-A-Y. All right, so when I squeeze, there's a little bit more coming out. Okay, so the whey stopped coming out of the cheesecloth. What I do now is open this up. Open up the bundle, crumble it up. So here is the casein that we have from the 2% milk. So there's less fat. I have my 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Just gonna sprinkle that on. And with my fingers, try to incorporate that. And before I mentioned that I have gloves on. And the reason that I have gloves on is because I'm touching this with my hands. And this essentially, at this point, is a ready-to-eat food. So what we need to do with ready-to-eat foods, now ready-to-eat food is a food that's not going to be cooked any further. The milk was heated, the whey was separated out, we took the casein, that's what we need. This is going to be pressed, and then once it's pressed, after that hour when we take it out of the press, you can take a slice out of this and eat it. So that's considered ready to eat. That's why I'm wearing gloves, because you're not supposed to touch ready-to-eat foods with your bare hands. And the main reason for that, the main organism of concern, is norovirus. Now, granted, I don't have norovirus now, and not everyone has norovirus all the time, or more often than not, someone does not have norovirus. But in a restaurant, whenever there's food that's going to be handled that isn't going to be cooked again or processed like a kill step for the bacteria or whatever it is before it's put on your plate and brought out to you, the person that's handling it has to have gloves on or use tongs or wax paper or some other method. So again, I'm just trying to turn this into somewhat of a patty shape here. So you can see that. Now I'm going to gather up all the sides of the cheesecloth again and just turn it. And as I turn, we'll catch any more whey as it comes out. This one didn't. I'm going to gather this one again. I can already feel that this one is looser. The fat makes a difference, the amount of fat. So there's less fat in this one. It's a little more, the crumbles are a little less willing to join together. But the press is going to take care of that. All right, so I have it knot. It looks like a knot. I have the mass of cheese here. Now what we do, just slide this out of the whey, W-A-Y, not W-H-E-Y. What I have here are 2 cheese presses. Here's the whole milk whey, casein in the cheesecloth. Here is the 2%. So what we do is just put this is a plate that's going to push down on the cheese. And as it does that, it's going to squeeze out as much of the excess whey as possible, because we want this cheese to be as much casein as possible. So I'm just gonna Get this going here. It's a little slow moving, but this process is way better than the way that we used to do it, which was just taking 2 plates and then pushing down on 2 plates for an hour. Everyone used to have to take turns because your arms would get tired from pushing so hard, putting all of your weight on the plates. Okay, so I'm just going to turn this a little just to set the spring tension slightly. Now I have to take the wing nuts and put them on. So this holds it in place so that when I crank this down, the spring doesn't shoot out and hit me in the face, which would probably look funny on video, but I don't think it would feel very good. Okay, so I have the wing nuts tightened down. I'm just putting my hand in there to keep the plate, that press part, relatively level as I tighten down on the cheese. So I'm just going to keep turning until I can't turn it anymore. And I'm just putting my hand in there to make sure that that white plate, the press portion, stays flat as we push it down, because with the cheese in the cloth basically being in like a ball, it can get pushed off center. Make sure everything is... I'm going to tighten these up again to make sure that doesn't fail. Okay. I think we're almost there. I don't think we could really tighten it down any further. And again, the reason that we're doing this is because the pressure is going to push whatever excess whey that is still in the cheese. It's going to push it out. It's going to drain out the bottom. So that we'll be left with casein. And the salt is going to help flavor it, but the pressure is also going to help the curds kind of knead together. So we should end up with a relatively creamy mass of cheese. One's going to be creamier than the other. I wonder if you can guess which one is going to have a creamier, more consistent texture. Is it going to be the whole milk, or is it going to be the 2%? Okay, now I'm going to set these aside, and we'll come back and take the cheese out of the press in 1 hour. So, see you in a little bit. I want to take a minute to talk to you a little bit more about this whey. Here's the whey from the 2%. Here's the whey from the whole milk. In a cheese processing facility, in a cheese plant, essentially, they have no use for this. Unless they're going to make ricotta cheese, which uses the whey and it pulls as much casein, because there is still a little bit of casein left in this liquid. You could pull out a little bit more, and it's used in ricotta cheese. Otherwise, it's spray dried and turned into a dietary supplement, or a dietary supplement for humans, for us, or for animals. But that's basically it. Some places, and I don't know why they would do this, but some places, if they don't sell it to another company, they just open the faucet at the bottom of their cheese vats, of their cheese tanks, the separators. Once they get the curd out, the casein that they need, they'll take this liquid, just open the faucet, and it just goes down the drain. So cheese manufacturers can make money by selling what essentially is their waste product that they don't have a use for. So these look about the same. We started with 1 quart, 32 ounces, 1 quart of milk. So here is the whey that's left over. Let me just check my little marker, and it was facing you. Whole milk. So this is the byproduct of making the paneer cheese with the whole milk. Okay, you can see that. There's a little bit of foam, but we're right about here. This would be half a quart or 16 ounces. We are just under halfway, I would say. So out of 32 ounces, 18 to 20 of them are garbage, or garbage for our purposes. So we needed 32 ounces of whole milk to make the amount of cheese that we're going to have, but more than 20 ounces of that we're just going to pour down the drain. We're going to do this again. This is with the 2% milk. This is the whey remaining from the 2% milk that was separated using vinegar. Okay, so again, there's no lines, there's no gradation, but it's definitely higher. It's definitely higher than the whole milk. So what does that mean? Does that mean that we were able to release more whey with the 2% milk? Does that mean, or does it mean that there was more whey in the milk to begin with because there's less fat? What a mystery. Maybe someone could look that up and find out how that came to be, unless that's just a fluke occurrence. But it would appear that 2% fat milk, reduced fat milk, releases more whey when you add vinegar to make cheese. Alright, so we'll check back in about an hour. It's time to check in on this cheese to see how it formed. If we look at both of the presses, not a lot of whey came out at all. So hopefully that means that there wasn't much to begin with. Otherwise, this is going to still be some pretty wet cheese. So I'm just going to release the tension here on the spring. Now I'm just building up the suspense. How did the cheese turn out? Springs out. Here's our press plate. I'll do the same thing here. Release the spring. There it is. That was giving me some trouble. Bring that back on. We'll get this one off. Tension spring, press plate. Here we go. Here's our whole milk cheese and 2% milk cheese. So I'm just going to push that back. I'm going to get this cutting board that I set here earlier. Okay. We have our utensils here. So this is whole milk cheese. Now it should be easier for you to see. And 2%. It's always a mystery when you undo the cheesecloth what you're actually going to find. Let's see how well it's set up. You can see there's a little depression there. That's from the knot in the bag itself. So what I'll do is just put it upside down so you can't see that. Get rid of the cheesecloth. Now we'll look at 2% milk. Hopefully it's not twisted into the cheese itself. And it can release relatively easily. It does have the texture of the holes in the cheesecloth because it pressed so hard. But so I would say in terms of, we're just going to have to cut it to get a sense. I'm going to take my tape markers here so I could get some pictures for you as well. And we're going to compare the texture. So in looking at the whole milk versus 2%, I would say the whole milk is a little better combined. Usually that's because of the fat content, helps hold it together, and the 2%, you could see a little bit of the structure still. So let's give it a taste to see what the difference is. Okay, now the whole milk. Okay, so the difference that I can tell you right away is the whole milk cheese has a texture and flavor an awful lot like mozzarella cheese. And the 2% tastes, has a faint, it doesn't have as much of the less fat, you could feel that. The mouthfeel isn't as strong of a presence, so you can feel the fat, you can feel the differences. The whole milk feels like a mozzarella cheese. You can feel the mouthfeel of the fat, you can taste the difference, the texture, the way that it hits your tongue is more like a mozzarella. This, the 2% almost has the texture of cheese curd, if you've ever eaten cheese curd before. It doesn't taste bad. It has, it seems to just not, it has more of a faint flavor, and the texture is not as well, it's not as cohesive, I would say. So maybe the word I'm going to describe is going to be very unappetizing, but maybe a little more spongy in its structure, where the whole milk is more uniform.